Hello and welcome back to my studio. Today I'm going to be painting a fox portrait on a 12 by 12 inch canvas panel in acrylics, and this is going to be impressionist style with little bits of detail here and there, but also I'm going to add some abstract elements as well. So there'll be lots of very loose brushwork and paint applied with all sorts of different tools and stuff, and different mark making. So let's get painting. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is give the entire canvas a coat of acrylic gloss medium. This is just to seal the pores of the canvas. And then while it's wet, I'm going to put in a base coat of burnt sienna. I've already drawn out the fox onto the canvas, and it doesn't matter how you get it there, whether it's hand drawn or transferred, traced, it doesn't matter so long as it gets down onto the canvas. And now I'm just going to put in some of the darkest areas first with a small brush. Now the eyes and the nose on this have to be, and the mouth area have to be very accurate. Otherwise the painting isn't going to look real. It's not going to look good. So you have to make sure the eyes are totally accurate, and the nose, and the distances between them, of course. So it's worth taking time and care and attention over this particular part of the painting. So again, I'm just knocking in some of the darkest areas here. I'm just using Payne's Grey on a very small brush here. It's an old worn thing that I tend to use. I'm not looking at accuracy around there. So need to get the chin, which is going to be a little bit in shadow. And then I change to a larger brush. This is a fan brush, a bristle fan brush. And I can start to put in limbs, the paws and legs, and the darkest areas of the body. So doing the darkest areas first. Not having to be quite so accurate here, because these will get painted over bit by bit and added to. So as we go along, and also the dark areas of the background. Still just using Payne's Grey with this large fan brush. I like fan brushes because of the random sorts of brush strokes you get with them. There's nothing really uniform about them. So this is going to be quite an abstract background. I'll put some light in there now, some white mixed in with the Payne's Grey gives a lovely bluish tone. Like that. Now it's very simple at the moment, but it will get a little bit more varied, that background, as we go along. This is just giving me the basic colours so that I can gauge the contrasts between the actual figure of the fox and the background. So I know I want a little bit of lighter area around here, and the same in this top area. It's going to be a bit lighter, but random and abstract. Now I'm putting in a base colour of the fox, which is going to be this orangey red colour. So this is only the base tone. I'll be adding lights and darks over the top of this, and then get a little bit more abstract with it the further away I come from the face. So I can start adding some reds and some darker reds here and there. I'm getting really quite dark with it as well, so that it blends into that other dark red, and adding some of that red elsewhere now into the painting, and some of the oranges. Starting to add colour now into this background. Very loose, very random. And put some greys also into the fur of the fox. And it's going to be a bit lighter, obviously around the mask here. The lower part of the mask is quite white, so it'll have a bluey grey tone to it. So you can add a bit of Payne's grey and white and perhaps a little bit of raw umber just to give it that natural or neutral greyish tone. Now putting in the highlights, which is titanium white and a little bit of yellow ochre, so that it's not pure white. And using a slightly smaller worn bristle fan brush here gives me some lovely abstract marks, and the paintbrush strokes will be quite visible as it dries, because I'm using quite thick paint there with this. You'll find that because you're using a bristle brush, the brush strokes will be visible, whereas with a nylon they'll tend to be more smoothened out and they tend to flatten off a bit more. So I do like bristle brushes for acrylic work. It's not ideal because you're using water with them, and it can tend to soften the bristles, but it will work if you just take care of the brushes. Now this background just needs to be gone over for a second time, the second layer, and refined a little. Now using my little silicone tool, this flexible silicone tool, to move the paint around while it's wet and give it an abstract nature. It sort of blends the paint and at the same time moves it around. So just reaffirming those dark areas now, the shadow areas of the fox. I will paint into these shortly, but just reaffirming the dark areas first. And this eye is going to be in shadow, so it won't be really quite bright, so I've gone over the top of that now, very, very lightly with some of this dark paint. Then I'm adding some of the reds back in. So this is all layers upon layers, which I find is the best way of painting with acrylics. You can produce some lovely effects like that. Putting some reds now back into the face of the fox, and adding some of those colours into this foreground foliage or soil, so that the whole painting will harmonise. So the colours that are in the fox are also here in this soil, and I will put some in the background as well, but only subtly. Then go over with my trusty fork to scratch through with a sgraffito technique, and that takes the colour down slightly but also gives it texture and movement. And then going back in to this eye now needs to be very accurate, and the same with this one, needs to have that colour put back into the eye, but very subtly, because this one's going to be in shadow or darker. And with the very dark colour I'm just making the outline of the eye, just reaffirming it. And the same with this one here, make sure that that eyelid looks correct. So I need to get this mouth correct and the lower part of the chin, which is going to have light reflected on it coming from below, so it's going to be a little bit warmer, like so, and where it joins the neck. Now I put in some more highlights into the white area around the muzzle and the collar of the fox, which has this beautiful white markings, but I'm using Payne's grey and white with a little bit of raw umber here and there to give the whole thing variation and light and shade and realism to a certain extent. I'm not using small brushes though. You can achieve realism with the correct colour and the correct brush mark. You don't really need very, very fine brushes to paint realism. You know, you don't need to paint every single hair. Rembrandt learned this as he got older. You don't need to paint every single hair on a person's head. If you know what you're doing, one brushstroke is all it takes. And he knew what he was doing. And it's up to us to learn how to do the same, just as he did. And that comes with time and experience and practice. And just keep painting. I've painted more or less every day for, well, since I was about 5. So I've had quite a few years' experience in painting. But that doesn't mean to say you can't achieve the same in less time. Of course you can. I mean, I was quite a slow learner. It takes me a long time to learn something. But once it's learned, it's learned. And you never forget it. So that's more or less, that face is correct. I just need to put in some of this fur. But it's not a fine brush, this, at all. It's just giving me the right marks. Now I'm going to a brighter orange now to show the transition between the highlight and the normal red colour of the fox. So it's an orangey colour, which will, especially on the top of the muzzle there, by the nose, it will get quite light. Red's now added here and there into the limbs and the paws in a loose, impressionist abstract manner. Reaffirming those highlights once again as they've sunken in and become darker. I need to just go over them once again where I want those really highlights to be. So this is a bristle brush. It's a bristle long flat. A few more highlights there into the fur, around the eye, and where I think they're required. And we'll also start adding a few of these into the background, into the ground beneath the fox. But I now want to concentrate on this muzzle, the highlights on the muzzle, because this has to be very accurate also. Otherwise you can lose the shape of the fox's face very easily. So I just need to have a little light on the bottom, the chin, only a little one, a catch light there. It doesn't go all the way around the chin, just for a tiny little mark, that's all it needs. And the same elsewhere, just little highlight marks. Now I'm going in with the fan brush once again, yellow, ochre and white and orange, in a loose style, loose manner, an abstract manner, and then with pure white over the top of that, here and there. But I want to put some little bits of grasses in here and there. So just done with the fan brush again. Now I'll scratch through. You can see how this affects that paint now. It produces wonderful and beautiful marks. And you find it very exciting to do this if you have a go at it. So just need to make these eyes a little bit more real, because this is the only place I'm putting the detail, is the eyes and the nose mouth area. Everything else is going to be nice and impressionistic and abstract. A few little highlights into those eyes. It's going to be more on this side because this one's more in the light, like that. And a few little dark lines now for the whiskers. They have very dark whiskers, but on this side the light's hitting these whiskers, and so they appear very light on the right hand side there. Now I'll add a few little marks with this small brush elsewhere to give a random nature to this fur, because they're not nice, neat, tidy, well-groomed creatures out in the wild. So they will have a scruffiness to them, which I like to show with the brushwork, the brush stroke. It can create movement as well. And I'll put in a few little lighter grasses here with this rigger brush, or it's a liner brush, in an orange colour. And then a few little lighter little grasses here and there over the top. Now, I'm going to abstract this in a moment, but they're there underneath as underneath underlying layers. So once they're dry, they'll sort of stay there. I'm more or less happy with those grasses now. Scratch through those marks once again. I'm putting some real heavy, thick colour now into the fur of the animal. This is cadmium orange, straight from the tube, nice and thick. So it's also nice and bright. I'll add a little bit of yellow to that as well, just to brighten it up a little bit, and a little bit of red in some of those darker areas once again. Again, it's all adding to the layers. One layer on top of another creates interest. And this area has got a bit dark and lost its form a little bit, so I'm just putting those shapes back in there. And be quite bold now with some of these paintbrush marks. A few little dots of colour elsewhere, which I'll now scratch through, which just takes them back just a little bit, just dulls them slightly, and then reaffirming the darks once again. So you have to reaffirm the darks and the lights as you go along until you're happy with the contrasts and with the shapes. Make sure it's all correct. So that needs a little bit of a red there on the elbow, just to show that where that leg is. So it's a little bit of anatomy is called for. So reaffirming those highlights once again, so that they really shine out now. Few random marks with the liner brush here and there, just to create a sense of movement, like that. Now, with a large fan brush, I can start to make abstract marks with this. And you have to be very bold here and go over parts of the painting. Now, I'm only applying this where I think it's required. I'm not going over the entire painting line and covering up what I've just done, but it's just creating this abstract nature to the painting, moving it around with the silicone tool. And that creates an abstract background that the viewer can decide what it is, what it represents to them. And adding some oranges now from the fox's colour into that background here and there. I'll put some reds in as well, just to make it more natural. The colours of the fox basically put into the background in an abstract manner. So let's put some reds in here, little bits here and there. You decide where you want these areas to be and then apply them with confidence. You must be confident when doing this, that this is exactly what you want and exactly where you want it to be. So I'm going to do a similar sort of thing here with the ground and these grasses, pulling it across the form of the fox here and there. I'm not worried about going over edges and lines, because this is the very nice graphic abstractness of the painting. And I can actually use this tool to paint with. Just pick up a little bit of paint off the palette and apply it with the tool. So I'm adding a very light translucent yellow to some of the areas to brighten them up and to soften some of the white areas. And that's the painting finished. Well, I hope you enjoyed watching this video and hopefully found it rewarding and entertaining. Let me know if you have any comments or questions that I may be able to help you with. And I look forward to you joining me on my next painting video. So until then, have a lovely day and happy painting!